Americans, what are your thoughts on Roe v. Wade being overturned by SCOTUS as per draft reports?
That's right, responded Buttigieg, representing 1% of cases. So let's put ourselves in the shoes of a woman in that situation. If it's that late in your pregnancy, then almost by definition, you've been expecting to carry it to term. We're talking about women who have perhaps chosen a name. Women who have purchased a crib, families that then get the most devastating medical news of their lifetime, something about the health or the life of the mother or viability of the pregnancy that forces them to make an impossible, unthinkable choice. And the bottom line is, as horrible as that choice is, that woman, that family may seek spiritual guidance, they may seek medical guidance, but that decision is not going to be made any better, medically or morally, because the government is dictating how that decision should be made.
Very eloquently said. I've always wondered, why can't people have simple moral objections to something they deem wrong without forcing others to suffer your opinion? The legality of something doesn't always have to align with your moral code.
My wife miscarried, aka spontaneous abortion, at 12 weeks, after several ultrasounds. This was an emotionally horrific event that has left us both scarred. 7 years later, we still question ourselves. Was there something we could have done differently? The thought of people experiencing that tragic loss and self-doubt having to be further subjected to a government inquiry and accusation of maliciously trying to terminate the pregnancy. Absolutely everything about that. As it was, we'd been struggling with fertility for nearly 2 years at that point, and we nearly lost hope. We are lifelong Christians and were devastated at the thought of the death of the unborn child. With the help and excellent medical staff, we were able to welcome 2 incredible little boys into the world about 5 years ago after a very difficult pregnancy, and a delivery that nearly cost my wife her life. I absolutely support all women who are struggling with the challenges of pregnancy, and fully support any that make the emotionally fraught decision to terminate a pregnancy. I call on all Christians that claim to support the sanctity of life, to vigorously support the expansion of age-appropriate sex ed in all schools, and the free availability of all birth control methods. Those are the best solutions to reduce the number of abortions, and miles ahead of criminalization, in any case.
My sister's hospital bill after having a kid with no insurance was $90,000. Women will now be forced into medical debt for kids they don't want, possibly from sex they never wanted to have. We are heading down a very bad and long road. The next few years will be really bad. Debt goes up. More kids in the system. More back alley abortions.
You think our social services are overwhelmed now? Get out your wallets, because there is about to be a generation of babies born where moms won't have the means to feed, clothe, and care for them.
On top of that, most people will feel an absolute obligation to that baby they didn't want, and then after a few bad years, they'll give up the child to the state when it's past an easily adoptable age. So the child will most likely have an utterly horrible life. They won't be adopted easily. Do conservatives adopt these older hard-to-home kids in huge numbers? Absolutely not. They talk a big game, but never do anything meaningful when it comes to adoption. So they love making a problem exceptionally worse and then doing absolutely nothing about it, and then complain about the issues that arise from that problem. So typical conservative game plan.
As rich people have the means to cross state lines and get abortions, this will predominantly affect poor and lower middle class. Some desperate women will risk illegal abortions. Many will die. Poor and lower middle class women are the least likely to be able to afford daycare, housing, medical care, and hell, even everyday bills. And college? Ha 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 no. With an rise of youth born into a future with bleak prospects, de-use and crime trends will get a bump in approximately 15 years. This will embolden right-wing authoritarians to push for harsher tough-on-crime policies and further lessen the penalties for self-appointed, freedom-loving patriots to murder people they don't like on the street. Mind you, all of these things are already happening today. We're just going to be seeing a whole lot more of it. So not that we'll effing learn a lesson or anything, but I'm just going to say it again. Presidencies last the length of a television series. Supreme Court seats are lifetime appointments. Link.
Rich women will take a weekend trip to London and come back not pregnant anymore. Poor people are probably going to have to order Canadian pills to terminate their own pregnancies, and if they get caught it'll be like the early WD laws where judges were handing out life sentences for having a joint.
This will backfire terribly and not solve a effing thing. Mexico recently decriminalized abortion. Coincidence? I think not.
Now just wait for Mexican abortion clinics geared towards U.S. citizens appearing all across Mexican border.
Child support payments better start at conception then.
And you should be able to get life insurance on your unborn fetus. Edit. And the deceased organ donor registry should be made mandatory opt-in with no opt-out option whatsoever, lest you cite your bodily autonomy to refuse, thus resulting in the avoidable demise of an unspecified number of human cells, regardless of viability. And the living, organ, blood, marrow, etc. donation registry should also be mandatory with no opt-out option whatsoever. Everyone gets tested, and if you're compatible you must donate, lest you cite your bodily autonomy to refuse, thus resulting in the avoidable demise of an unspecified number of human cells, regardless of viability. And all vaccinations should be mandatory with no opt-out option whatsoever, lest you cite your bodily autonomy to refuse, thus resulting in the avoidable demise of an unspecified number of human cells, regardless of viability. And any fertilized eggs, embryo discarded, wasted via IVF, a large number of them, as anyone familiar with the process knows, are murder. Start prosecuting all those Christians and Republicans who choose to pursue IVF instead of adopting one of the thousands of kids in the foster system.
The foster care system is proof the government doesn't care about unwanted children yet want to force more to be born. It's all politics, though guarantee if any of them ever got in a sticky situation, illegal or not, an abortion will be had available.
THR healthcare system is also the same. Any child born with any health needs in minimum wage family is F-ed.
People will still find ways to get abortions.
People think there were no abortions before 1972. They would be wrong.
My wife had a miscarriage last year. Because we were well past the point of most miscarriages, not quite to the stillbirth cutoff, but not far away, we were told the odds of my wife passing the fetus on her own were slim and that surgery was the safest option. We were required by law to acknowledge in writing that the procedure would terminate the dead fetus and that it came at risk of infertility and death. Our doctor was required to tell us the developmental age of the dead fetus and which developmental milestones occur around that time, as well as offer us an ultrasound to see the dead fetus. We cried the entire time. We desperately wanted this child. Our doctor cried, apologizing every step of the way that we had to go through this insensitive bullpoo on top of losing the pregnancy. This fetus was dead in every sense of the word, but because the procedure in question is also used for abortions, we had to jump through these goddamn hoops to avoid putting my wife's health at risk. And it's not like my state doesn't offer alternatives for non-viable fetuses, conception due to RP or incest, or instances where health is at serious risk. This was the alternative. If we were actually getting an elective abortion, it would have been significantly more time-consuming and soul-crushing. You literally have to take an online course. Abortion access in this country is already a joke. All this is going to do is get people killed.
That's a heartbreaking story. I'm so sorry you had to go through that.
As a woman in a state where it will likely become illegal, I am reconsidering my decision to have kids in the future. I don't know that I am comfortable with the idea of getting pregnant if difficult but necessary medical decisions wouldn't be between me and my doctor.
Child abuse will skyrocket. We'll have exponentially more unwanted kids, and even less resources for them than are available now. Which is none. A lot of women will be forced to raise babies that look like they're rapists. And the abortions some women are able to get will be harmful or deadly. What a bunch of mother-f***ing scumbags.
It gets worse than that. Suicide among pregnant women skyrockets. Domestic violence and spousal murder skyrockets. Infant murder skyrockets. And then, as you said, child abuse and neglect will skyrocket.
Weird that this got leaked. CNN keeps repeating over and over how a leak anywhere near this level has never happened in SCOTUS history. Someone wanted this leak to stir things up before the midterms.
It's either someone trying to warn people what's coming, someone trying to make sure no one does a Kennedy flipped his vote late in the Casey case and changed the outcome, or the court itself playing a PR game to see what public reaction to such a decision would be. Or it's just made up. Maybe it is, but honestly the writing for Roe was on the wall when SCOTUS decided Texas' probably unconstitutional abortion law could stand. They were basically saying they planned to overturn Roe v. Wade and the whole thing would become a moot point, conveniently informing us that they'd made up their minds even before arguments. Edit. I must admit, I really don't get Reddit or how this comment got so many upvotes. Greater than.
Greater than I have a foreboding of an America in my children's or grandchildren's time, when the United States is a service and information economy, when nearly all the manufacturing industries have slipped away to other countries, when awesome technological powers are in the hands of a very few, and no one representing the public interest can even grasp the issues, when the people have lost the ability to set their own agendas or knowledgeably question those in authority, when, clutching our crystals and nervously consulting our horoscopes, our critical faculties in decline, unable to distinguish between what feels good and what's true, we slide, almost without noticing, back into superstition and darkness. Greater than. One of the saddest lessons of history is this: if we've been bamboozled long enough, we tend to reject any evidence of the bamboozle. We're no longer interested in finding out the truth. The bamboozle has captured us. It's simply too painful to acknowledge, even to ourselves, that we've been taken. Once you give a charlatan power over you, you almost never get it back. Carl Sagan, 1995.
Greater than unable to distinguish between what feels good and what's true. Basically what social media have done to America on a large scale.
Everyone is talking about unwanted pregnancies, but people are forgetting about those who very much want to be pregnant but have an unviable fetus. Nature is cruel and not all pregnancies result in healthy babies. I'm talking beyond cerebral palsy and Down syndrome. I'm talking truly horrific, has no chance of survival, type birth defects. This fetus will simply be born for the sole purpose of suffering and dying. Why put them and the family through that? Why put the mother through months of knowing her child will die after birth? Months of mental anguish as people congratulate her and ask what's the due date, knowing full well that day will be the worst of her life when it should be the happiest. People who support that or simply shrug are effing monsters, and I hate them with all my heart. And don't give me this God's plan bullpoo. It's pure evil and immoral, and no loving God would ever inflict such anguish. So F you and your high horse you rode in on.
Some states are currently drafting bills that would outlaw abortion for ectopic pregnancies. When an embryo implants in the fallopian tube, there is absolutely no chance of it becoming a viable fetus, but there's a good chance it will grow large enough to burst the tube, resulting in life-threatening internal bleeding. The evangelical authoritarian crowd believes that a time bomb clump of cells that will never become a baby is worth more than a woman's life.
By almost every metric, the boomer generation has left their descendants worse off. After enjoying affordable housing, education, a minimum wage they could live off of, expanded rights, they're taking it all away. This really isn't surprising at all.
They are often fond of spouting that soft times create weak men create hard times, fascist crap. They always fail to realize they grew up in soft times and are creating hard times. That is their place in that supposed cycle. They occupied a relative paradise compared to what came before and what is emerging after in their wake.
Horrified. This won't stop abortions, just safe ones. The infant death rate will go up, and maternal death rate will go up as well from this.
Abortions will always be available for rich people. Making abortion illegal only hurts people who are poor and/or of color.
We're a democracy ruled by 30% of the population's opinion.
Thank you for watching. We upload new videos every day, so be sure to come back for more fun. Please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed the video.